it's really an indication of how important this topic is. And we have here this evening a lot of people who have been out on the streets for the past couple of weeks, since the Ferguson shooting in August, and have really brought the whole level of struggle in the city to a new level. Young, enthusiastic, courageous activists that are setting a new standard in the city. And we're very honored that you all are here. And we hope that after this presentation that we'll stay and, as Anna said, have a discussion. You know, not a question and answer thing, but a general brainstorming, exchanging of ideas. I wanted to just mention a couple of quick things to start with, and that's, number one, there are a lot of different approaches on how to deal with this epidemic of police shootings. And it's a defender's perspective that virtually anything that is done is helpful, because it makes the epidemic an issue. It makes it's something that people think about and talk about. These shootings, these killings, these murders have been happening for a long time. But the reaction to the police murder of Michael Brown and Ferguson has caught people's imagination in such a way that the murder of Tamir Rice in Cleveland did not go unnoticed. The choking death of Eric Garner in Staten Island did not go unnoticed. Every time there is another incident of brutality or murder, it's instantly shared through social media, and it has a reaction. And this is putting a tremendous pressure on the government and the wealthy people who control the government. And that's the first step in trying to win any struggle, is making something an issue. So while we have our own political view, and there are some tactics and strategies that we favor more than others, the most important thing at this point is to support everything, and not to get into, so much of a, you need to discuss things, you need to have your own ideas, you need to promote your own ideas. But in general, when someone is out there on the front line, the place to be is next to them. That's the first thing. The second thing is, there's a debate that's come up over whether this is a struggle that affects all of us equally, or whether it's primarily a black struggle. Should we be saying all lives matter, or should we be saying black lives matter? And one view is that if you emphasize the fact that these killings are coming down primarily on the black community, you divide people and you weaken the movement. In the defenders, we have the opposite view, that the way to build unity is to recognize that the black community is a nation within a nation. It's an oppressed nation within a dominant oppressor nation. And it's targeted in a particular way. We are all on the target of the police, but the black community is in the bullseye. There's no contradiction between calling for the broadest working class unity in the struggle against the police, and recognizing that it is in an intrinsic way, at this point in history, a black issue, and the statement Black Lives Matter becomes a weapon in that struggle that we all need to support. It's not a contradiction between class and race. It's the question of finding the correct connection. And as Oliver Cox, African-American sociology professor back in the 40s in Tuskegee Institute put it, class is primary, but race is not secondary. It's kind of a Zen Marxist. But so that's the second thing we wanted to say. And the third one is, I am as aware of anybody else of the contradiction of my being the person giving this talk tonight. I may be the oldest person in the room, so I'm an old white guy talking to a group of primarily young activists, primarily African-American young activists. So please just accept it in the spirit of, we'd like to make a contribution a little bit on a theoretical level, We think we have some things worthwhile sharing. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, take them or leave it. But we also want to provide a space for everyone to participate and share. So if it's okay, we're going to do a little analysis. And that's also, in just in our own defense, we have been out on the streets and sitting down at Broad and Belvedere and supporting the initiatives that everyone has come up with, and we are there in support. And this is one more effort in that direction. Okay? I hope I got over that. I want to start by going back 80 years. It's always good to have a historical perspective. 80 years ago was 1934. That was the height of the Great Depression, the greatest economic downturn of the modern period. And at that time, did it shut off? Still on? Okay. At that time, 1/3 of the country was out of work. You know, and it's a truism that when white America catches a cold, black America catches pneumonia. So as bad as it was across the board, and I had an uncle who wound up living 4 years with his family in a little house that he had to insulate and bring water into himself because he was an electrician and there was no work for him for 4 years. And the family used to bring him vegetables once a week. A lot of people were going through that. But in the black community, it was far more devastating. And we're talking about the 30s when we were in a period of Jim Crow apartheid. That was so bad that the South African government used it as a guide to develop apartheid laws. It was such a racist period here in Virginia that Walter Plecker, the head of statistics who promoted ethnic purity, lectured in Germany, and his ideas were picked up by the Nazi Party as they developed the master race theory. Virginia, contributions to the world. It was a terrible period, and you would think, with 1/3 of the people out of work, that there would be tremendous repression at that time. And there was. But in 1934, there were only 65,000 black people in prison in the whole country. Now the population was half of what it is today, but only 65,000 black people in prison. If the trend had continued, today there would be 130,000. But instead, there's 1.1 million. In the 30s, the government started, under pressure from the people, started a series of public works programs, the Work Progress Administration, the Public Works Public Administration, and the Works Progress Administration, and the Civilian Conservation Corps. My dad, when he was 19, had been out of foster care for 3 years, couldn't find work, got a job planting trees out in the woods for a year with the CCC. It was a tremendous program. Millions of people got jobs. The whole park system in Virginia, the state park system, was a WPA project. The First Landing, the park, beautiful park down in Virginia Beach, was built by a black Civilian Conservation Corps unit. And there was another park down there as well.
The Botanical Gardens.
Botanical Gardens down there.
By women.
By women, by black women. The government started these programs to put millions and millions of people to work. They don't do that today. They don't have a mass jobs program. We got people who have never had a job, who got out of high school or dropped out of high school, never found their first job. We got people coming out of prison, unable to get a job because they got a felony conviction. We got people who have just been technologically made obsolete because they didn't learn haven't had the opportunity to learn the computer skills, technical skills. And we got people coming out of VCU with $25,000 worth of student debt, working at Starbucks or Crossroads. Something's different. Back in the 30s, despite all the government programs, unemployment never got less than 8%. What got them totally out of depression was World War II. That brought the industry back to full operation, put people to work. That plus so many white men going off to the military, the government encouraged the bringing in of women and black workers, men and women, into industry, heavy industry, Rosie the Riveter. This was new. My mother wound up going to Washington as a 19-year-old working for the telephone company because that was a critical area in D.C. And it changed society. It opened up a lot of things for people, at least in terms of a vision. And after the war, it clamped down again. But it was the jobs programs and then the military buildup that got the country out of a depression. Well, why don't they just do the same thing today? We had a recession that started in 2007. It went on, we're told, until 2009, and then it ended. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average went from 7,000 in 2008 to 18,000 a month ago. And the rich people are making money hands over fist. But the jobs have not come back. They got it down to 6%, they say. That doesn't count the kid who dropped out of high school and never had a job. They're not counted. Doesn't count somebody whose unemployment has run out and they no longer go down to the unemployment office. They're no longer counted as part of the workforce. It doesn't count anybody in the military. I don't think it counts prisons. I'm not positive about that. And it doesn't count anyone who works as much as 1 hour a week. If you work 1 hour a week, you're employed, as far as the government is concerned. So 6% is BS. And black unemployment is always twice what white unemployment is. So for the black community, we're much closer to the levels of the Great Depression. And the black community is more than 40 million people. So why don't they do a jobs program? Or why don't they gear up the military and get us out of this economic crisis? In 1934, the ruling class, that 1% that Occupy talked about, the 1.5% of the country that owns or controls 80% of the economy, they had faith that the economy was going to recover. And when it did, they would be hiring. And they didn't want to put a large part of the working class in prison. So they started temporary job programs to keep people from being too angry. They didn't care if you starved. I told my mother one time, she's 95, she lived through all this stuff. She said, I said, Ma, it was the unions, they were on the streets, they demanded jobs programs, that's how we got it. And she said, no, I don't think so, I don't remember that. But what it was the government looked around and saw all these young men out of work. And they got nervous. They wanted them off the streets, so they put them to work. Today, they put them in prison. Why? Because they know the economy is not coming back. A decade or two ago, we had a fundamental change in the economy where each recovery used to be you'd have a recession, it's always boom and bust, that's the capitalist nature. You go through a low period and you come up higher than you did before. So the economy went like this. Now, the recovery is not as strong as before the recession. So we're going like this. It goes back to the end of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War produced a lot of military spending. There was a lot of money flowing through the economy. Back in those days, if you were 20 years old, you could quit a job anytime and find another one the next day. It was easy. There was a lot of money to be made, and unemployment was relatively low, and the standard of living was relatively high for most people, never for everybody. But today, it's changed. And one of the reasons is, after the Vietnam War, with the decline in military spending and the decline in profits made from war spending, the industrialists decided they had to squeeze the economy tighter to get more profits. So what they did was they did two things. They shut down factories in the United States and shipped them overseas. They shut down the auto industry in Detroit and shipped it either down south to non-union laborers or overseas. They instituted a whole series of labor-saving devices in industry. Mini mills in the steel industry, robotics in auto industry,